Hey, this is Tyler with MCC, and I'm here with Kyle and his 69 Restomod Camaro. This is a really cool car with a really cool story, so please stick around and check it out. And make sure to like and subscribe and let us know what you think of the car in the comments. All right, so it's a 1969 Camaro.
Yep.
So go through the story. I shouldn't have asked before, but go through the story of like why you bought it and where you found it.
Yeah, for sure. So, during COVID, my dad passed away, not from COVID, but he passed away, and he'd been fighting some a brain tumor since I was a kid.
Jeez.
And just every 7 years had to have a surgery, and like the last one didn't go well, and we saw that he was declining quickly. And one of our last conversations was just about doing things that make you happy and don't wait, because you're never guaranteed the next day.
Yeah.
And so he didn't say anything about the Camaro, but ever since I was a kid, he talked about getting one, and he never did. He was just like, it's not the right time. Got to do this, I got to pay for this, got whatever. And I was like, you know what? Like after he passed, I was like, I'm gonna do something fun that's gonna honor him and something that like my kids will enjoy, and just do it. So I kind of went on the hunt for a 1969 Camaro, and through random connections, I met a guy who was selling one of his cars. He had a big car collection and wanted to get rid of one, and this was it. And it was his daily driver for 35 years, and he had like 160,000 miles.
Yeah, what'd you say? What a daily driver to have, a 69 Camaro.
Yeah, and he was living over in Santa Cruz in California and commuting over to San Jose over the hill, like 35 or 40 miles every single day in this 1969 Camaro. And the crate motor, had 160,000 miles on it, 280 horsepower, and just drove it. But he had all of these classic cars. He had several lifts in his garage.
That's sick.
And he worked on all himself. It was just like a passion project for him on the side of his day job.
Mm-hmm.
And then he painted this car himself in 2015. Everybody's like, this paint's incredible. It's like, the old guy I bought it from painted it in his garage.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. And so, I bought it, had it shipped to Idaho, and I was like, man, this is just gonna be fun. I intended just to drive it as is, because it was so cool and so clean. And then as it goes, 2 months later, I'm like, man, this thing is a dog. The suspension, it's like driving a boat.
Yeah.
The power like sucked.
Yeah. And then you were saying with the altitude too, you get screwed.
Yeah, anytime there was an elevation change, especially driving over, like Horseshoe Bend area, I really noticed it was struggling. And so it's like, you know what, maybe just like a blueprint motor, and we'll convert it to fuel injection, and that'll be good. Transmission was working great. Didn't need to spend too much money to get a rebuilt blueprint engine. I was like, I'll just get a 383 stroker, it's gonna be no problem. And then
famous last words.
Yeah. And then I ran into another buddy who introduced me to a guy who was starting a performance shop here in Idaho from SoCal. And I met him, and he's like, hey man, I heard that you're trying to build a Camaro. I was like, well, I was just gonna get this blueprint motor, but if you're interested in installing it, that'd be amazing. So he's like, well, those blueprint motors, they're really hit or miss. So how would you feel about an LS3? I was like, well, I mean, I'm not against it. He's like, because I actually had a customer that just canceled one, so I have it. So I was like, okay, well, what's that look like, horsepower wise? What's that going to mean for everything else that's, used on this car?
Right.
He's like, it shouldn't be a big deal. And I was like, all right, well, and it was the LS 376, which is the 525 horse.
Okay.
And the guy had ordered a few upgrades for it, so it was about 570 horsepower. And I was like, okay, that sounds fun. And I had these stock SS wheels that I think were like 225s, like on every corner, and they were 16-inch wheels. And so he did the motor, and he's like, hey man, like when I unbolted the motor, the transmission looks a little worn, I don't know how much longer it's gonna last with this motor. I'm like, okay, I guess let's, you know, all right, what's another $3,000? That's not a big deal.
yeah.
We'll figure it out. And so we did that. He introduced me to a guy named Bruce at Modern Driveline, and he's the local Tremec dealer here, and he, you know, did that, and then put that in. Realized, man, the suspension is terrible with this. Whenever I'd step on it, the car would lift up to the sky, and I would be, you know, staring up for 20 seconds. And so I was like, all right, well, I guess suspension, and then the brakes, and then I was like, oh, well, the brakes aren't going to fit with the stock wheels, so we got to upgrade the wheels too. And then after we did that, he's like, hey, you know, you only got a 10-bolt Chevy rear end that's also has a ton of miles, so you're probably gonna want to change that. So there's this Dutchman, which is like a local company that does the Ford 9-inch conversions, did that. And then the guy who did transmission, part of the deal with that was he got to take my car into his booth at SEMA. So, you know, I had the only car that was under $500,000 at SEMA. They parked me next to these massive lifted trucks with like 42-inch tires and chrome everywhere. This looked like a Mini Cooper. Like, it was so small compared to everybody. And but it was a cool experience at SEMA, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so yeah, I just, you know, I drive the heck out of this car. Last year I put 5,000 miles on it. So I didn't want a show car.
Right.
Just the paint was so good, and you know, the guy James at Performance Street Cars did such a clean job on the engine, everything. Everybody's like, man, this is a show car. I'm like, it's actually not. Like, there's like popcorn in the back seat for my kids riding in it. Like, this is the opposite of a show car.
Yeah.
And that was like the whole point of this. Like, it wasn't, you know, to honor my dad. He would have daily driven this thing. He wouldn't have just let it sit in the garage.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a pretty sweet car to be ripping around and enjoying too.
It's amazing.
But it's not like a, you know, you took a $400,000 Camaro or like a one of one or a, you know, an all original and are driving that every day. Like, it had already been kind of resto-modded at one point.
Yeah.
So it should be driven. Like, that's what cars should be driven.
Exactly. Yeah, it wasn't an original SS. You know, it's got the RS front end, which I like the look of.
I do. The RS looks really good. Yeah.
So yeah, it's not like sacrilege. I didn't like ruin a RS SS or anything like that. So the old guys can relax.
Oh, dude, it drives me nuts. But anyways.
Yeah.
And he had done quite a bit to it, other stuff to it. So you mentioned it's got newer seats.
Yeah. So, you know, the guy who I bought it from was 71 years old, and he was living over in Santa Cruz, which is right near the beach. And so, you know, it'd get cold there in the mornings, and it was a daily driver. So he actually fit these seats from a 2016 Camaro in here, and it's got heated seats, power recline, power move forward, backward. So, I mean, and that's why there's no back seat, is because these seats are so much chunkier.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Than a stock seat.
That makes sense.
But it was just him and his wife, so he didn't really need the back seat.
And you've got plenty of legroom here too. Like,
Yeah, it's not bad. Like, when I'm driving, like, luckily my kids are young, so they can still fit back there.
You'll be taking them one at a time.
Yeah, exactly. They like to. I have a son who's 10, and he always tells everybody he's going to get this. I'm like, yeah, when I die.
Buddy, you got like 40, 50 years, maybe more, before you even get a chance to get this thing and own it.
And seeing how he drives an RC car, I don't know if I don't know if I'm going to give this to him. I think my daughters might be getting this one.
That's funny. And it looks like did you update the gauges or did okay.
Yeah.
Are they Dakota Digital?
He's Dakota Digital.
Okay, sweet.
You know, I kind of wanted to keep the stock look. I was actually, what made me do like the kind of the vintage style is it was actually like an Andrew Tate video. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah. And he talked about, you know, Bugatti.
Yes.
He's like, why do these cars, why does the 2003 Bugatti still look like it's, you know, period correct? It doesn't look dated. He's like, because there's nothing digital on the dash.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
And so, you know, like if you do a digital dash, it's like the technology changes so fast.
Right.
It's really easy to look outdated.
Yep.
And so I kind of went for like a minimalist, like kind of classic look. There is like a little digital, but not very minimal to where it won't look dated in 2 years.
Exactly. No, it looks great. And then all your other gauges down here look awesome.
Yeah,
too.
it
Like
just
those
changed out to LED.
Yeah.
So it's been fun, you know.
Do your daughters like it too?
Oh yeah, yeah. They sit in the back seat and they go, "Step on it." I was like, yeah, it's pretty funny. They like to tell people how fast it is.
Yeah. Oh, holy shit, dude. Oh, this thing just wants to rip, huh?
It wants to go.
That's gonna be a pretty special or surreal moment when you get your kids in here, knowing your dad always wanted one of these too.
For sure.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it's like they always tell people like Papa Randy would have loved this car, you know?
Yeah. Sounds great too.
MagnaFlow exhaust just turned down because with the new rear end I couldn't fit the exhaust out the back anyways.
Oh really?
But I kind of like the clean look of no mufflers.
It looks
no
good like that.
tips,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, for sure. Do you have anything else you think you'll do to it, or is it kind of the way you want it? This is how it's gonna live.
I mean, it's kind of the way I want it. You know, like even though it's like mostly done, it's kind of funny. There's still things that are old in it. So, like before we set up this thing to do the interview, the door handle stopped working. It's got like Ring Brothers exterior door handles. All the components on the inside are old. So I couldn't open it from the outside. So I'd have to hop in and open it. I'm like, man, this is embarrassing. You know, like, it's like nice resto car and I can't even open the door.
It's just old car things.
Old car things that slowly start to break.
Yeah.
It's like no matter what you do, there's always some old component, you know?
Yeah.
Breaking. Yeah. But you know, it's like one of those things when I first got it, the power, it felt like so much power, but as you drive it more and more, you slowly get used to it.
Right.
The guy who built this has a 67 Chevelle with a massive turbo on it with like 1200 horsepower. And I was like, how did you get here, man? Like, this thing is out of control fast. He's like, I started off with 500 horsepower, and every 3 months, I'm like, feels a little bit slow. And now I'm driving this, you know, it's like, oh, like now I step on it, I'm like, it's all right.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel that fast to me, you know? But
I get that as you get used to a car, and you learn more of its limitations, and you push it and you push it and you push it, and you're like, okay, you know, like this isn't the crazy beast. I've tamed the beast a little bit,
totally,
or understand it better.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I think that, you know, this kind of horsepower range is almost ideal to where you can step on it and go quick, but it's not like a terrifying monster.
100%.
You know?
And you still have some reliability too.
Right.
Like you're not blowing motors and seals and turbos.
And we can have a conversation in the car. It's not insanely loud. You know, like I had in high school, I had a 69 El Camino.
Oh, sweet.
And you know, the whole point at that time of your life is like for show. You know?
Loud and fast.
Loud,
as
fast.
Yep.
And I had this nasty cam in it that was way too low beat for that type of car. And you know, like it was an automatic, and you let off the gas, and it would like chirp as it was sitting there.
Seriously?
Yeah. And I was like, oh man, like, you know, girls will love this car, but they actually hated it because it was an El Camino, so like only dudes thought it was cool.
Yep.
And it was so loud to ride in.
Yes.
Nobody liked it. And I was like, this is like, I actually let my aunt, she was moving, and she's like, hey, can I borrow your truck? I'm like, are you talking about my El Camino? It's not a truck.
It's a car.
Yeah.
It's a performance vehicle.
Yeah. It's like, and so I let her borrow it, and about 5 minutes after she left, she brings it back. She's like, I'm just gonna get a U-Haul. This isn't gonna work.
That's awesome, dude.
She's like, all the stuff is gonna fly out the back. I was like,
yeah.
This isn't really for moving.
So you've had like a love of cars, obviously, since you were a kid. Does that come from your dad too?
Yeah, you know, it was funny because my dad was a salesman his entire life, you know, and I bought the El Camino. He's like, oh man, this is gonna be a fun project that we can work on, you know?
Yeah.
I bought it. It was actually my neighbor's car, and he's like, it'll be a fun project for us to work on. I'm like, sweet. So my neighbor had this thing in his driveway. Since I was about 10 years old, had a camper shell on it. It was like oxidized raspberry red, like it was hideous. And you know, but I had my eye on it because I thought it was cool, and it was kind of the only muscle car that I could afford at that, you know, as a 16-year-old.
Right.
And so when I got my license, I approached him. I was like, hey, like, can I buy your El Camino? It just sort of sits there. He's like, you want to buy an El Camino? I'm like, yeah. He's like, this one. I'm like, yeah, I want to buy it. And he's like, well, how much you got? I'm like, $2,500. He's like, sure. So I gave him $2,500. Had the camper shell on it.
Oh my god, camper shell on
yeah,
El Camino.
It's so ugly. And so my buddy and I drove it. He's like, what do we do with this camper shell? I was like, let's just go ditch it. And so we just loosened it, and I just took off, and it flew off the back in like some neighborhood like near our house. And my dad's like, oh, where'd the camper shell go? Well, oh, we took it to the dump. He's like, oh, okay. And just, I'm sure somebody was like, what the heck?
Just in the middle of a street.
Just in the middle of a street somewhere. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it was, and so I just sort of like learned to work on cars from that.
Cool.
And then, that was like during the Fast and the Furious era.
Dude, yeah.
So I eventually at some, I was 17 years old. I had a buddy whose dad had a Z06 Corvette.
Okay.
So this is like 2003.
Yeah.
Like when they first came out, and he got rear-ended, and they totaled out his car, and so he's like, "Hey, do you want to put this motor in your El Camino?"
Dude, no way.
And I was like, "Sure." So at that time, I think it was like a 400 horsepower, which was crazy for like 2003. And so we put that motor and transmission in my El Camino. So it was a 6-speed manual, and then a 400 horsepower Z06 motor. And it was just too much power.
Dude,
for
that thing must have, you
a 16-year-old.
probably couldn't even keep it on the road.
Oh, no weight in the back. It was wild. And yeah, so I started doing the body work on the car myself, with me and a buddy, just like sanding it and primering it. So like
Nice.
The front half was primer, the back half was like old crappy paint.
Yeah.
And we were driving around one night, kind of cruising, and we're racing. I pull up to this light, and there's a brand new M3 at that time. 2003 M3.
Yeah.
Whatever. I can't remember the name of that. It's the M43.
Yeah.
E43.
E43, E49.
Yeah, like
yeah.
one that still looks pretty cool today,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, the kind of round nose.
Yeah. And my buddy's like, oh, this guy wants to race you. I'm like, man, that car's like 60 grand. Like, look at my car. There's no way.
Right.
And so the light turns green. He takes off. I was like, oh, okay. I guess he does. And so we go to the next light, and I was like, all right, well, this guy definitely wants to go. And so I take off, and the speed limit is 45 miles an hour. And his car is probably like 320, 330 horsepower.
Yeah.
I had done a little work to that Z06 motor, so it was around 450. And so I just like smoked this guy, and went way too fast. He backed off at some point. I went through an intersection. Apparently there was a cop sitting there.
Oh my god.
And then there's a slight right turn, and we kind of turned to the right. I kind of lost control of the rear end of my car, and I remember looking at my buddy in the passenger seat, and I was like, dude, I'm so sorry.
Oh my god.
Mid like, right?
Yeah.
And so I ended up pulling over after I corrected. I didn't crash into anything. I was like, dude, I am so sorry. And all of a sudden there's a knock on my window, and I roll down my window, and I get yanked out of my seat.
Holy shit.
By this cop.
Oh my god, dude.
Yeah. And he's like, do you know how fast you were going? And I was like, no, how fast? He's like, 145.
Holy shit, dude.
And I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, because my speedometer actually only went to 140. So
wow, I got it to go that fast.
Yeah,
Thanks for telling me.
Yeah. And I was terrified because I was a good kid, never gotten in trouble.
Oh.
And I told the police officer, I was like, hey man, I'm so sorry. This guy in this car was like talking crap to me, and so I just felt like I had to put him in his place. He's like, I didn't even see another car. I'm like, right.
Okay.
Yeah, so I beat him really good. And so
now he just thinks you're crazy picking up other cars.
Yeah, and so he ended up being really cool and like letting me go for just like an exhibition of speed. And I was like, you know what, like maybe this car isn't for me. And the cop told me, he's like, hey, if I ever see you driving this car again, I'm gonna give you this ticket for what you did. I'm like, okay, that seems fair. So I actually went home, and my dad's like, oh, you're late. It was like midnight. I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna get rid of this car. And so I ended up selling it.
Did he ask any questions?
He didn't really ask any questions because I was always going to car meets and stuff. It wasn't like that unusual to come home late as a 17-year-old, And so I ended up buying like a Mitsubishi Eclipse because I was like, oh, this is like not too fast. Like,
Yeah.
it's fine. And I was like, man, I'm gonna tell him the story one day and we're gonna laugh about it. But I actually never told him. So.
Well, you're telling him now.
You're telling him now.
Yeah.
So I was like,
he had to have known something was up.
Oh,
you got home late, and now all of a sudden you want to sell the car.
Yeah,
and it's
like,
still in one piece.
yeah, exactly.
Like, what this kid do?
Yeah, it's like maybe I'll get another car someday.
Yeah.
So like this is like, you know, I've always had kind of fun cars. I've always bought something that I like, but this is like just pure joy. This one. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Man, that's a good story. and like I feel like back then those types of things happened.
Oh yeah.
Where people let you go.
Right.
Now that never happens. Now.
No.
It's like never the case because
Right.
it's just different times.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I drove a Chevy Blazer and I used to speed sometimes or do stupid shit. And
Yeah.
that was my one thing. Like, I didn't drink in high school.
Yeah,
I didn't
no,
do anything.
me either.
And I just would do dumb shit in my car
Yeah.
because I was just fucking around.
Right. That's
And
all you did. Yeah.
the amount of times I got let go, and I'm like, I don't think I would get let go today. Like, I just
Right.
don't think I would.
No.
It's like, you can't make a mistake.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
that's a good story. That's funny. That's funny. What if you're I mean, you've had an El Camino. You said you've had a bunch of other cars.
Yeah.
What has been your favorite thing about this car while owning it compared to like maybe those other ones that they didn't have, or is it just the look, like it being a Camaro and a '69?
Yeah, you know, I think that like because this isn't my daily driver,
Yeah.
so I think that like no matter what you drive, even if your daily driver was like an R8 or Lamborghini or whatever, I think you eventually just like stop thinking about what you're driving, and it's just like this is how I get from point A to point B.
Yep.
Whereas like this car, you know, it's not my daily driver, but I drive it a lot. But it's still fun because it's not an everyday thing.
Right.
So I still like appreciate it and enjoy it, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, plus once you turn this thing on, it's like, you know, it's not an everyday car.
Yeah, for sure.
Once you sit in it, you know it's not an everyday car.
Yeah, well, and that's what's fun too, is like, you know, like having kind of like a hybrid between like a, you know, like a new car and an old car.
Yeah.
You get kind of like love from both sides. Like you get the older guys who are like, okay, like it's not over the top like
Right.
new school, but at the same time you get like, you know, like kids running up to it going like, oh my gosh, the green, like every kid.
Yeah.
You know, like I've won Kids Choice at like several car
Really?
shows. Yeah, like which I think is like hilarious. So,
Yeah,
like,
that is funny.
Like it's just, I think the color is like fun and different, you know, and it's sort of like a mix between old and new with the black wheels.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique look. When you bought it, were you like, I like the green, or you like, maybe I'll paint it, or what was your?
Yeah, you know, honestly, like I was actually looking for that like orange, like that, I think it's like Hugger orange.
Yep.
Like I was actually looking for that color.
Okay.
And it was super hard to find.
Yeah, that's a really rare color.
Yeah, and
If it's stock.
yeah,
or
'cause-
factory.
yeah, exactly. And so I was like, you know what? Like this green one is also unique, and I think it's kind of cool. And then, and honestly, like if you would have asked me before I bought this if I'd ever buy a green car, I would have never picked this,
Yeah.
right? But like after seeing kind of what's out there at car shows, you know, there's a million '69 Camaros.
Mhm. There's a lot of them. I mean, you literally nowadays just need a frame. And
Right.
You can build one.
Yeah.
There's a whole kit.
Exactly. So it's so unique, and this was actually an original 1969 color.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, called Rally Green.
Oh shit!
But it
I
was-
didn't know that.
Everybody hated it, so it's super uncommon.
Yeah.
Like, and so like that's what's kind of cool. Like every once in a while I'll get some guy who's like, I haven't seen a car, you know, a Rally Green Camaro in 40 years. I'm like,
Wow.
yeah. And so that's kind of, you know, a kind of cool, unique part about it.
Yeah.
And now, like everybody kind of associates me with like, oh, you're the green Camaro guy, you know, because it is unique.
Yeah.
You either love it or hate it.
No, it's definitely unique, and then like you said with your wheel setup too, it just looks so good. It looks very modern, like retro but modern, and I don't know.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
I think everyone, like you said, there's a million Camaros out there. They're so overdone.
Yeah.
But it's such a cool car.
Yeah, for sure.
It's again like my favorite as a kid. I had a picture of a Camaro, '69 Camaro, on my wall, like to manifest having one
Yes.
when I grew up, and I've always loved them. But you know, there's only so many ways you can modify or paint a car.
Totally.
And literally everyone has come up with just about everything. I
Yeah.
think they've even K-swap or B-Series swapped one.
Yeah.
Like, thrown a Honda motor in one, which I would definitely do to fuck with people. I think that's hilarious
for sure.
But it's like it's cool to see this one just with the green color and the wheel setup, and it's still kind of in between, because people either go super Restomod,
right,
shaved door handles, or
right,
like built-in door handles and super low and sleek and tie in the bumpers and everything is just different, or they keep it all original.
Totally.
And there's a few in your class where it's like an in between, but you don't see as many. And then, like you said, this color is just super unique.
Yeah.
And they built this with this color is cool too. Like, or back in the day they used to do these.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was a color.
Yeah. So they had like a dark kind of forest green, and then they had this. And I think it was only on the 69, I believe.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hey, I hope you liked the episode today. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Somewhere over here there will be a thing that says like and subscribe. And if you like the car, please leave a comment. It's really cool. Oh my God, you're a lot taller than me.